Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're getting into a text that, well, it doesn't pull any punches. Pablo Ostenberg's de Nascimento's work doesn't just critique modern society, it puts it on trial. It's a really provocative and unflinching piece, and we're going to break it down step by step.
Right from the get-go, the author's entire argument is just laid bare in the title, Republic, a Fraud, and Countries of Functional Illiterates. I mean, that's designed to be a shocking statement. So let's unpack exactly what he means by this and see why he thinks it's true.
Okay, so to really understand his argument, we have to start with the core problem that he identifies, and that is functional illiteracy.
So, what is functional illiteracy? According to the author, it's not just about being unable to read. It's something way more subtle, and maybe even more dangerous. A person can see the words on the page, they can recognize them, but they can't really grasp the meaning or analyze the subtext or think critically about what's being said. It's this deep gap in actual comprehension.
And this is where his argument takes a really sharp political turn. He claims a functionally illiterate nation is the paradise of any tyrant on duty. This is a huge point for him. He's drawing a straight line from a population's lack of critical thinking to their political vulnerability. He's basically saying that if people can't question what they're being told, they are incredibly easy to manipulate and control.
So how does this idea of widespread functional illiteracy lead him to the explosive conclusion that the Republic itself is a fraud? Let's follow his logic here.
Now, this is where he makes a really fascinating and kind of counterintuitive comparison. He argues that in some ways, a monarchy is actually more honest. Why? Well, because in a monarchy, the power is obvious, it's visible. Accountability is crystal clear. It all lands on the monarch. And even the sycophancy, the bowing and scraping, is all out in the open. But in the republic that he's describing, he says the power is hidden, it's diffuse, nobody's really accountable, and that sycophancy is still there, it's just disguised and way more deceptive.
He argues that this whole system, and he uses the damning phrase Republican asylum, is built on a culture of sycophancy, of ingrained subservience, and of just plain cowardice. He says this beggar's spirit is what allows these little petty tyrants to pop up everywhere, because in a system like that, no one is ever really held responsible for anything.
And right here, he just highlights this massive gap between the ideal and the reality. He points to Article 1 of the Brazilian Constitution, which says, all power emanates from the people. For him, that's not how it actually works. It's just a beautiful, empty sentence that has absolutely nothing to do with the subservient reality he sees all around him.
Okay, so to really drive his point home, the author then uses this incredibly powerful and, frankly, pretty shocking metaphor to show the consequences of this whole situation.
He basically asked the question, what does all this subservient behavior actually look like in the real world, day to day? And his answer is this really provocative comparison that's meant to make you sit up and pay attention.
He writes that these individuals, quote, do not differ much from pets. They lie in wait for some treat when they get right which behavior they should maintain. And the key idea here is this concept of conditioned behavior. He's arguing that people, because they can't think for themselves, just learn what to do to please their bosses or their superiors in exchange for little rewards. You know, kind of like a trained animal.
And he pushes this metaphor even further. He describes these well-trained citizens as giving a paw, rolling over, and even playing dead. Now, obviously, he's not being literal. Giving a paw is that performative agreement, just nodding along. Playing dead is pretending you don't see what's wrong just to stay out of trouble. It's this scathing critique of conformity and cowardice.
So after laying out such a bleak and, let's be honest, scathing diagnosis, you might think he just ended on a note of despair. But he doesn't. He actually flips the script and offers a really direct and forceful prescription for how to fix it. And the antidote he proposes, it isn't a new law, it's not some systemic reform, it's something way more personal. It's something that has to come from inside each individual. It's courage.
The very first step on this path, he says, is intellectual. He calls for the courage to risk thinking for yourselves, to actually break free from those conditioned responses and dare to have a genuine, independent thought.
Then he really raises the stakes. He uses some incredibly provocative language here, calling for the courage to abandon the prostitution in which you find yourselves. Now, that's a harsh word, but he's using it on purpose to describe the act of trading your own dignity and integrity for the security of getting those little treats we talked about earlier.
But it's not just about rejecting the negative stuff. It's about actively moving towards a positive goal, the courage to head towards dignity.
It's a call to deliberately choose a path of self-respect and moral integrity.
And finally, he brings it all together with this incredibly powerful call to action: courage to free yourselves from the farce imposed with your consent. And this is the real core of his argument. The system, this farce, it only exists because people, whether they do it actively or passively, consent to it. So the ultimate act of courage? It's simply to withdraw that consent.
So the author's analysis is definitely unsettling. It's built on these stark metaphors and a really harsh diagnosis of our time. And he's not offering any easy answers. Instead, he just leaves us with this profound challenge, one that turns his whole critique back on every single one of us, in a world that is so saturated with information and just immense pressure to conform. What does it truly mean to think for yourself today? And do you have the courage to do it?